to share some of our favorite new books with you today. We hope that they give you an idea of the many great options that are available to you for summer reading.
Check out the Summer Reading Loop Guide for recommended titles, book trailers, and your summer assignments.
Let's begin with realistic fiction. The first realistic fiction title on my list is Trigger by Susan Vaught. Now, somehow, and unintentionally, a few of the books I selected this year have suicide as an issue, but they each address the issue from very different perspectives. Trigger is unique in a couple of ways. First, Jersey Hatch is not someone you'd expect to be a likely candidate for attempting suicide. By all appearances, he seems to be popular, bright, successful, from a good home, etc. Second, the story opens with Jersey recovering from a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head. He suffers from brain and physical trauma, but perhaps most painful of all is that he has no idea why he attempted to kill himself, and neither do the people closest to him. So the story centers on his quest to answer this question as part of his long recovery. Susan Vaught has worked as a clinical psychologist, so she's uniquely qualified to write about the effects of brain injuries, and you see that in her writing. Second realistic fiction title on my list is This Song Will Save Your Life by Layla Sales. This is one of the Nutmeg nominees for 2016. At the heart of this book is the simple but important idea of knowing yourself and being comfortable in your own skin. Elise Dombowski has never fit in or been popular, despite her many efforts. She's already made what she describes as a half-hearted suicide attempt. But Elise stumbles upon a group of people and an underground club that offers her a new start. Elise quickly realizes that her love of music, her dad was in a 1980s band that was a one-hit wonder, has made her uniquely equipped to develop into a really good DJ, and she begins to feel like she belongs. The book explores issues relating to bullying pretty extensively, but also the nearly universal issues of fitting in and finding your place in the world.
Okay, I just had one realistic fiction book on my list this year, and that's Forgive Me, Leonard Peacock by Matthew Quick. This one's a Nutmeg nominee as well, and this is by the author who wrote the Silver Linings Playbook that was a film some of you may be familiar with. In this story, we have Leonard, who is celebrating his 18th birthday, and big surprise, nobody remembers, not even his mother. This birthday, however, is going to be different because Leonard plans to shoot his former best friend and cruel bully, Asher Beale, after school. After that, he plans to kill himself. First, though, Leonard needs to deliver 4 presents to the 4 people who made his worthless life a little bit better. This book takes place in a single-day time frame, so the tension and the suspense build as we're reading, and we're hoping that one of these people is going to pick up on these suicidal signals and stop Leonard before it's too late. I would say it's a psychological thriller that really puts you as a reader inside Leonard's tormented mind, and it also reveals a dark secret about Asher Beale. And if you've read Catcher in the Rye, I think you're going to find a lot of similarities between Leonard and Holden Caulfield.
Okay, the next title on my list is If You Find Me by Emily Murdoch, another Nutmeg nominee, and probably the favorite title on all of my lists this year. This title is about 2 sisters, ages about 14 and 5, who were abducted by their drug-addicted mother deep into the woods of Tennessee. They've been cut off from the world for years and suffered terrible abuse and neglect, as their mother is often away for weeks or even months at a time. It's really a story of survival, as the girls are found ultimately by their father and reintroduced to society. It's nearly impossible not to root for and admire these strong and courageous girls. Those of you who liked books like A Child Called It, or Hope's Boy, or Wayne, should also enjoy If You Find Me. And lastly, for realistic fiction, is Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe by Benjamin Sayans. This title is set in the 1980s, complete with cultural references that a reader might either find humorous or maybe miss entirely, and it focuses on 2 Mexican-American teens, Dante and Aristotle, Ari for short, who have a unique friendship and bond. Family issues in this book, as well as issues dealing with sexual orientation, are addressed heavily in the story, but in a really honest, realistic, and interesting way. Now, as we move on, we're going to go to the kind of science fiction, fantasy, or dystopian category. My first title is The 39 Deaths of Adam Strand, which in a lot of ways is very realistic with sort of a key exception. This one also deals with death and suicide. Adam Strand has from a very young age had an inexplicable fascination with death, and he's attempted to kill himself 39 different times. Each time he has awoken in a couple days without injury or even a scratch to show for it, regardless of how violent his attempt was. He's a profoundly negative and pessimistic person without any logical explanation for it. I came across a review of this title that likened some of the themes and writing to the work of Laurie Halse Anderson's In Speak and Jay Asher's 13 Reasons Why. Next for me is The Ocean at the End of the Lane by Neil Gaiman. Another Nutmeg nominee. This one's a little hard to describe, but as I was reading it, it kept reminding me of Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children. What begins as a story about a man visiting his childhood home in England quickly evolves into a story about the supernatural as the man recalls a series of events from when he was 7 years old. At the center of the story is a duck pond, or ocean, an 11-year-old girl, and a struggle to defeat some evil forces that have wormed, literally, their way into their world. It's an entertaining, well-written story that should appeal to anyone who enjoys that supernatural element in a story, or, as I mentioned, enjoyed the Miss Peregrine's series.
I have actually two on my list for science fiction fantasy, and the first one is Every Day by David Levithan, and you may know this author. He's written a lot, Nick and Nora's Infinite Playlist, Will Grayson, among others. And even though it's in science fiction fantasy, it's a very realistic book with one impossible condition that kind of pushes it into the fantastic. And this probably has the most unique premise of any book that I read this year, and it works well and sets this book up as a very special one, I think. And at the heart of this book is the question, can you truly love someone regardless of what they look like on the outside? Levithan creates a story that allows us to explore this question through the main character, who's simply known as A. And A wakes up every morning in a different body. It can be male, female, any race, any ethnicity, any size, any age. And one day when A is living as a male, he meets someone who for the first time in his life he feels a true connection with. But will she know it's still A tomorrow when he could be a girl, or an obese middle-aged man, or anybody? So this is called body jumping, and through this, the book takes on how we see ourselves and others, and it will make you question your understanding of human identity. The second one that I have is called Ready Player One by Ernest Cline. This one actually is a Nutmeg nominee, and it has a movie deal in the works with Steven Spielberg scheduled to direct. And this one was probably the most fun read and the most surprisingly entertaining book on my list. I wasn't expecting to like it at all. I'm not into gaming, but you really don't have to be to get caught up in the competition that goes on in the book. It's set in the not-too-distant future where people plug into the Oasis, a virtual world where you go to school, you can meet people, and just escape the reality of life. So the main character, Wade, dreams of finding 3 keys left behind by James Halliday, the recently deceased creator of the Oasis. Whoever finds the keys and is able to unlock the treasure is going to inherit the Oasis and Halliday's fortune. What I loved about this is that it takes a group of socially awkward high school hackers and pits them against the government establishment think tanks, and they sort of have a cyber quest that's full of puzzles and action and even includes some 80s video game trivia. So if you're into gaming, you'll probably appreciate all of the gaming references even more than I did, and I think the movie will be filled with some spectacular graphics and special effects. We're going to move on to historical fiction for the next category, and I have a couple here. The first one is a Pulitzer Prize winner called All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr. And I guess the question is, do we really need another World War II novel? And I believe in this case the answer is yes. It's an inventive and beautifully written story that immediately pulls you in and holds your attention to the very end. And it's less of a war novel, although you do have that. It's more of a focus on the lives of the 2 main characters. And those are a blind 14-year-old French girl who flees Paris after her father goes missing during the occupation, and a German teen named Werner who is orphaned and pulled into a branch of the Hitler Youth because he has a skill in electronics. And their paths cross near the end of the novel in a very unexpected way, and I think you'll be thinking about them for a long time after the story ends. And I think it illustrates how average people during wartime really have to struggle to decide every day between morality and survival. I think this is one to put on your must-read list. The second one that I have is actually an adult book. It was named the New York Times Best Book of the Year, called A Constellation of Vital Phenomena. And I think that I'm including it for mature high school students. It's a very different book. It's about an Aryan culture that most of us know little or nothing about. It's set in Chechnya during the Second Chechnyan War with Russia, and it's very bleak. It requires a little bit of work on the part of the reader. You're going to learn about a region and a struggle that has a little bit of complex history, but I think the reward is in the characters and their resilience. You will respect the gifted surgeon who works alone in a hospital with so little that she has to sew a rebel's chest together with dental floss. You'll suffer with the artist who draws portraits of the missing people from his village and posts them like ghosts in the forest. And you'll want to save the 8-year-old little girl who is on her own with her suitcase in the woods after her father is captured and taken to a torture camp.
My historical fiction title is War Brothers by Sharon McKay. This is a fictionalized account of sadly very real events still occurring in parts of Africa, in this case Uganda. In a country ravaged by civil war, a rebel army, the LRA, routinely abducts children as young as 10 or 11 and forces them into military service. They are then brainwashed and forced to kill in order to survive. Jacob suffers this fate and now must struggle to save himself and his friends. The story, for which there's also a graphic novel version, really brings this terrible issue to life and puts a human face to it. It wasn't too long ago that Joseph Kony, the leader of the Lord's Resistance Army highlighted in this book, was all over the news and social media. The story of the hunt for Kony and the plight of child soldiers in many parts of the world continues.
Okay, and then finally, I have 2 memoirs to share with you, true stories. The first one is Sergeant Rex, The Unbreakable Bond Between a Marine and His Military Working Dog by Mike Dowling. It's a fascinating look at how the military trains and uses dogs in war. Rex, who's pictured on the cover, is a German Shepherd who served more than 5 tours in Iraq with multiple handlers and survived several injuries, including being blown up by an IED along with his last handler, Megan Levy, and you'll see her picture up here. Mike Dowling, the first handler, writes the memoir of the special bond that develops between the dog and his handler. So you get an up-close look at exactly what the dogs do on missions and how they protect soldiers in war zones. Rex is actually now retired and has been retrained so he can live with Megan Levy, who he was injured with. And he also has his own Facebook page where you can learn about other military working dogs. And finally, the last book that I'd like to share with you is a memoir from Eric Greitens, who is a former Navy SEAL, and in this memoir called The Warrior's Heart, it was written especially for teens. So if you're looking for an inspirational, uplifting book, one that challenges you with a call to action, this one's it. Eric Greitens has lived an incredibly full life of service to others. He describes his experiences in college as a Rhodes Scholar, a photographer, journalist, and a volunteer in refugee camps in Croatia and Rwanda. And it was his experiences here in the refugee camps that ignited a passion in him to have a more direct role in helping to protect innocent people. So at the age of 26, he decided to enlist in the Navy and trained to be a Navy SEAL. So after serving in Iraq, he came home. He founded an organization called The Mission Continues, which helps wounded warriors find a way to continue to serve. He's done a TED Talk, and recently he announced his intention to run for governor of Missouri. So his is a story that will really inspire you to think about how you can make the world a better place through your actions.
So those are some of our suggestions for summer reading titles for your 2015 summer reading. Feel free to check out our summer reading LibGuide page as well as the NHS Facebook and Twitter accounts for additional suggestions throughout the summer. Good luck.